Welcome to our special program, Climate Talk. I'm Guan Xin, live in Beijing. Tackling climate change will have far-reaching implications for the financial industry. As more governments roll out climate change regulations, trillions of dollars are going to flow towards clean energy and green technologies, involving significant portions of the global financial industry. So how is the private sector investing in sustainable technology to mitigate climate change risks? And what role will financial institutions play in the global endeavor to curb global warming? Joining me today are three distinguished guests: Leslie Maasdorp, Vice President of New Development Bank; James Chang, Consulting Leader of PwC China; and Song Wangqiu, President of Metsä Group China and Asia. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. So, Mr. Maasdorp, let me start with you. Help us understand the role of international financial institutions like New Development Bank to promoting climate change action on the global stage.
The entire financial services industry, and by that I include banks, commercial banks, investment banks, pension funds, asset managers, hedge funds. The entire industry has a very critical role to play, because we are sort of, if you like, in the middle. We are intermediaries. We intermediate and provide financing for the real economy. But New Development Bank and multilateral banks have an even more special and unique role to play, because as a development bank, we are committed to public good outcomes, to development outcomes, and therefore climate change and fighting climate change is central to our mission. Over the next 5 years, as part of the bank's new strategy, we will endeavor to have almost 40% of our investments meet climate finance criteria. And all of our peers, the World Bank, Asia Development Bank, European Investment Bank, all of these institutions are committed to that objective. So in short, what I'm saying is that because of the significant changes that are required in terms of allocation of capital to low carbon activities, we have to play an important role to be catalyst so that the rest of the industry can follow.
And Mr. Chang, to the private sector, how important is it now for businesses to invest in ESG? And how committed are Chinese enterprises, according to your observation?
Well, it is very important, obviously, for business to be focused on the ESG. ESG is no longer as a demonstration of it being a good corporate citizen. It's actually an essential element into business strategy. I'm sure many of you have heard from many of the global CEOs of the leading companies. They have been committing to embedding the ESG into their day-to-day operations. As they have been pointed out, the corporation is no longer just responsible for the shareholders. They're also responsible for many of the key stakeholders, such as their customer, their employees, society, regulators, right? So all of this require them to be really focusing on building E and S and the G into the strategy and the business activities. Now, on your second point about the Chinese enterprises, we actually just have conducted a couple of surveys together with UNDP as well as WEF in terms of the readiness of the Chinese enterprises. Let me put it this way. There's actually surprisingly quite a lot of awareness by most of the corporations. But I guess from awareness into taking the action, still there's a long way to go. Okay, so again, I think it's more, there's the mindset right now is happening, but how do we turn the mindset into a skill set and the capability? That's going to require some time.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Song, we know that Metsä Group is a front runner in sustainable technology. So how has climate change impacted the forestry industry?
Thank you for inviting me here. And yes, definitely for a industry player in the forest industry, the climate actions are being taken globally would have a tremendous impact on our industry. For Metsä Group, we are a Finnish company owned by over 100,000 private forest owners in Finland. And we cover a very long value chain from the forest management, including growing the forest and managing the forest, protecting biodiversity, ensuring the carbon sequestering function of the forest, down to really the processing of wood into timber products, engineered wood products, pulp, packaging board, tissue paper, a wide range of products that have a lot to do with our everyday life. Since we are capital intensive and we are also resource intensive, so climate policy will, in my opinion, in the foreseeable future, really reshape our industry. Of course, bringing a lot of supporting factors for the industry to develop further sustainably.
Yeah, Ms. Maasdorp, now we're seeing collective action from all over the world. What do you think about the global market for green finance? What changes have you seen in that market, and where do you think it's heading to?
As you've just correctly pointed out, we are clearly at the cusp of a very historic turning point. There is so much momentum behind the sustainability drive today. I mean, as you know, most of the G20 economies, the European Union, China, the United States, South Korea, Japan, all of these significant global economies have all committed themselves to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. And as James alluded to, most companies are translating that target into embedding those into their business models and business practices. So they are looking at how do we make this happen. With respect to green finance, I think that 2021, 2022 will mark a decisive move where green finance, the green bond market, will no longer just be a niche market. At the moment, the green bond market constitutes just over 1% of the total global bond market. But now it will truly go mainstream. I think it is very likely, in fact, that when COP26 happened, COP26 is the global meeting of governments and all stakeholders, will take place in Glasgow later this year. It is likely that coming out of that meeting, regulators will put in place new measures, new incentives to green the financial system. One of the key requirements today to facilitate the further growth of the green finance market, in my view, is a set of unified standards. We need convergence in the regulatory rules of the game, if you like. There are too many, there's been a proliferation of standards and metrics leading to a bit of confusion in the market. So one of the critical steps required today is to have a more unified set of measures that can make it more simple for investors and stakeholders to understand.
Mm-hmm. Are you confident that this issue will be touched on at this Glasgow meeting?
I'm very, very confident. All the indications are. If you today just do a online search for carbon neutrality pledges, you will just see thousands of indications from all the big companies. Your leading global companies in every sector, in the energy sector, in the transport sector, in the oil and gas industry, they're not just making these commitments, but they are beginning to operationalize or indicating how are they going to operationalize these targets. I mean, one of the things I should just also mention is that for some reason or another, COVID-19 and the pandemic and this very dark period we have gone through has raised heightened awareness around climate change. COVID-19 has obviously been this, major shock to the global economy, but all the indicators are that consumers, regulators, allocators of capital, the financial service industry, there's so much awareness of the urgency of actions required towards decarbonizing the global economy.
Indeed, we need to build back better from this crisis. And Mr. Chang, Ms. Maasdorp just mentioned that green finance should grow from a niche market to mainstream. China is already the largest market for green loans and second largest for green bonds. So, Mr. Chang, what do you think about the potential for further growth and innovation?
Yes, there's still going to be, despite China already being the largest in green loans and bonds, it needs a lot of more financing. There's a couple of reasons, right? First of all, we all know China's still not peak yet. They're going to wait until 2030, and from 2030 to 2060, it's only going to have 30 years for China to neutralize it. Where we all know for the Western countries, it gives them 50, 60 years. And the second reason is that the landscape of China's energy sector, as we all know, China are mostly concentrated in fossil-related energies, most particularly in terms of coal. So the transition from, on the supply side of the fossil dependency into renewable energy is just going to require tremendous financing activity. And also, as you notice, mostly is on the loans and the bonds. But as we know, on the consumption side, a lot of the technologies such as carbon capture and storage, some of the hydrogen technologies, storage technologies, is still at a very early stage of its maturity. And traditional banks and the bonds are not going to be able to support those kind of financing. It needs, different type of financing, such as VC, PE, and other forms of financing financial products. So a lot of more innovations as well as a scale of the financing is required.
Do you think China will become a leader in these technologies?
Yes, I actually think that's going to happen because there's quite a lot of interest. The leadership is fully committed, and we are seeing a lot of PE and VCs have expressed the interest in putting allocations into these sectors.
Okay, and Mr. Song, in your industry, what innovations have been invested in to improve sustainability?
Well, to start with, the requests coming from the financing institutions towards our industry or towards our company fully now responded. For instance, in Metsä Group, we have launched a green finance program back in 2019, and we have in that program categorized the areas that we believe will bring positive impact to climate in terms of improving, for instance, our forest management. Whenever we grow more forest than we harvest, and then we secure the biodiversity of the forest, and then we secure the carbon storing of the forest, and also in our wood products through the whole life cycle of it. And then when it comes to the, for instance, production processes, we emphasize a lot the investments on how to increase our material efficiency, meaning that today we basically utilize 93% of all the side streams of our wood processing industry processes, and our aim by 2030 is to achieve 100%. So nothing would be wasted. And then when it comes to energy, which is a major element in our industry, for us, we are privileged because most of our energy sourcing is based on renewable materials. Because during the process of making pulp, by separating lignin from wood fiber, we can generate renewable energy, either in the form of electricity or biogas or heat. And really our aim is to achieve 100% fossil-free operations by the year 2030. And today, basically 90% of all the energies we use in our processes is renewable. And our target, as I said, is really to achieve 100% by 2030. So these are all the areas, and then of course we continuously pursue actions to reduce the use of fresh water, for instance, and reduce the emission levels continuously. So these are all the areas which are welcomed by our financiers when it comes to getting funds either for our operations or for our new investment. We're now actually in the progress of making a huge investment in northern Finland, which is 1.6 billion euros into a bioproduct mill in northern Finland. And a big part of that project financing is based on green terms negotiated with the banks and other financial institutions. So we definitely believe that these are really very encouraging drives that are going to reshape our industry towards more sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Very strong commitment from the business side. And Mr. Maasdorp, what do you think about China's carbon neutrality target? How is NDB involved in China's mission to reach carbon neutrality by 2060?
And I think that the ambition of reaching carbon neutrality by 2060 is a very ambitious target. This is a very energy-intensive, carbon-intensive economy. China contributes 28% of global emissions. So make no mistake, the scale of the challenge ahead of China over the next 30 years, as James Chang specifically also highlighted, is something not to take very lightly. There's going to be significant changes required in many industries. However, I should mention that already over the last decade, China has seen the fastest drop in the emission intensity of its economy. So the trajectory has already been, in other words, there's kind of a wind and a momentum behind the effort of what lies ahead over the next 20 years. I think there are also certain advantages that China has today. One, over the last 40 years, as you know, during the period of reform and opening up, there's been, dramatic growth and significant economic progress. But in the process, also significant environmental damage resulted from that. But what that has done is raise public consciousness and awareness to the point where in our activities, for example, as a bank, we can see that most of the cities here in China have very explicit targets as part of their 5-year plans. All of the mayors, the cities are committed to achieve certain standards with respect to making the cities more livable, making the cities more green, creating smart cities. In Tianjin, in Xiamen, in many Shenzhen, all of these cities have very explicit plans to create more green spaces, removing cars off the road, having more electric vehicles, electrifying the bus fleet. China has now 90% of the world's electric bus fleet. 50% of all electric vehicles sold in the world today are sold here in China. And there are many other statistics which suggest that the momentum is behind China's effort over the next couple of decades to reach carbon neutrality.
And how is NDB involved in China's mission to become carbon neutral?
Involved very, very directly in several ways. The first point to make is that 2/3 of the world's energy comes from cities, right? Cities, and the largest cities in the world, in fact, are in the BRICS countries. They're in China and they are in India. In order for us to deal with the negative consequences of rapid urbanization in terms of congestion in these large cities, we are very, very engaged to helping, especially China and India, but also Brazil, Russia, and South Africa, to create smart cities. This is all about, having, making sure that we can close the coal-based power stations that are close to these cities, because that's a major source of pollution, and putting in place renewable energy. all of our energy projects, for example, are in the renewable space. We have not financed one coal-fired power station. Our energy is either solar rooftop. We're deploying in Shanghai. We've got an offshore wind project in Fujian province. We're doing hydropower in Russia. So our energy projects contributes very directly towards this effort of greening our cities. And then the last point I'd like to make, we're specifically interested to tap into the potential of new technology. I think that innovation and new technology is going to be a major driver of this change that is going to sweep through all of our cities and countries over the decades to come. So we want to support these new, whether it's smart water management systems, all of these new technologies that are coming up now. We want to replicate those, take them to scale to help our countries with the green transition.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. And Mr. Chang, China's carbon net zero target requires massive investment. So what do you think about China's demand for green financing and opportunities for financial industry?
Yeah, there's a tremendous demand for the green finance activities, and as I mentioned before, and it also has to be in different forms. It cannot be just on the loans and the bonds. It's being estimated China will need probably somewhere between 100 to 150 trillions over the next 30 years in order to be able to achieve that, which means it translates into somewhere between 3 trillion to 5 trillion every year in terms of the investment needs. And if you look at that portion, government fiscal policy probably can only make up somewhere between 10-15% of it. And so majority of that has to come from the private sectors, right? Mm-hmm. And actually, the way I look at it, it's not just the green finance, but it's also what we call the transition finance, right? Because you don't get some of the fossil companies or some of the, what do you call it, the brownish industries overnight switch into greenish industries, right? Because the standard of the green is pretty high. So during the transition, and they require a lot of financing activities as well. Now, in terms of the areas of the opportunities for the financing sectors, the way I look at it, you could break it into 3 elements, right? The supply side, as Leslie has pointed out, a lot of a renewable transition to the renewable energies, such as solar and wind is already very mature. But what about the Thai offshore winds as well as the hydrogen, those type technology. But also on the consumption side is the green construction. The technology used to improve the energy usage efficiency, storage, distributive technologies, right? And also on the capturing, in terms of those two are all for what we call the reduction of the emission. But what about in terms of the elimination? So as I mentioned before, in terms of technology for carbon capture and the storage, those are all at a very early stage and are going to require tremendous amount of the financing activities to support it.
So if we talk about investing by the private sector, one key issue to think about is these investments financially rewarding? Your thought on that?
Yeah. That's a very good point. I guess it depends on if you can pricing in what we call the externalities, right? Because the emission itself has what we call the negative externality. Because the enterprise is a private profit from that, but the cost is being taken by the society. On the other hand, the investment itself, the green technology itself, is what we call the positive externalities. So how do you make sure we can monetize those externalities where the emission itself being penalized because by mechanisms like a carbon trading and a carbon pricing, On the other hand, those are good investment being having have a good price and a good premiums on it. So I think those are the mechanisms needs to place to support that.
Okay, and Mr. Song, how is China's carbon neutrality target affect the Metsä Group's China strategy?
Well, definitely, this China's carbon mission or vision, I call it, is highly respected by Metsä Group because it is very much in line with what we drive as our company sustainability strategy. We have a wide range of customers here in China, and China is growing more and more strategically important for us. And we work very closely, of course, with our customers and to cooperate together, partner together to achieve targets in the carbon climate fighting areas. And coming back a little bit to the financing of innovations for our industry, this is very interesting area because with the advancement of technology, there are a lot of really business cases that are potentially to be commercialized, to become big businesses coming out of the wood fiber into the future. A couple of examples by Metsä Group. One is a demonstration plant we have now invested in Finland, which is now processing from wood pulp into textile fiber, meaning that our vision is that we can really produce garment out of wood in the future, and that process will have a less emissions and will based on renewable materials, and it's a very sustainable alternative for cotton or other synthetic materials that is based on on oil. So these innovations, and of course we also invest quite a lot in terms of developing solutions to replace plastics, for instance, in our packaging business area. And as you know, in China, limiting the usage of harmful plastics is now centrally promoted action. And there are indeed a lot of opportunities in this area, and we're putting a lot of effort and money into really developing our products that are capable really in the functionalities to replace plastic products in the future. And we have continuously also that for instance, for our packaging board that we use to package food or cosmetics or pharmaceutical products, that we call it less is more. What it means is really that we want to increase our material properties using less materials, but having the similar functionalities that are capable to meet the end user requirements. So these are really all the areas that will require financing, but definitely they are very much meeting the expectations of the financiers.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Maasdorp, China not only want to promote green agenda at home, but also in global cooperation. So what do you think about China's target to make Belt and Road Initiative greener, especially in how to leverage finance to make these projects more sustainable?
Look, it was an announcement which President Xi himself mentioned in his address to the Boao Forum a few weeks ago. And I think it caught a lot of people by surprise because it was quite a significant commitment. Essentially, the implications of that is as follows. China has increased. I mean, I've lived in China now for the last 6 years, and I've seen a systematic increase, not just in public awareness in terms of broad how consumer behavior, but in every industry. We've seen these changes within China. And there's an application of rigorous environmental standards. Companies do reporting with respect to their emissions and so on. But when Chinese companies go abroad, they naturally follow the laws, the regulations, the rules that exist in that country. So let's make it concrete. If China Development Bank or China Exim or any of the Chinese financial institutions, ICBC and so on, finance a project, let's say in Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan or any of the neighboring countries as part of Belt and Road, which standards should prevail? The standards in these other countries, in the Belt and Road countries, would typically be lower than Chinese standards. So greening the Belt and Road is quite a significant policy objective, which the president highlighted a few weeks ago. Now we need to see, when the rubber hits the road, what will that actually mean? Does it mean that a Chinese company, a construction company or an energy company, if they invest in a neighboring country, in Mongolia or Kazakhstan, do they follow the standards that they adhere to here in China? Because that will have certain cost implications. They will now invest and have higher cost in doing that particular, let's say, energy project in Mongolia. So I believe it's a very laudable, it's a very important policy objective to green the Belt and Road, but it still needs a bit more refining and further thought processes about how that objective will be met.
Okay, gentlemen, that's all the time we have for today. We have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your wonderful insights. And that's all for this edition of Climate Talk on CGTN. I'm Guan Xin in Beijing. Thanks for being with us. Until next time, bye for now.